with Nikki Lorenzo. This is Inside California Politics.
Glad you're with us this week. I'm Nikki Lorenzo in Sacramento. On the show today, we go one-on-one with Southern California Congressman Mike Levin in the 49th District, which is described as a purple district, leaning slightly more blue. CA 49 spans northern San Diego County, including cities like Oceanside and Vista, and stretches into Orange County as well. Levin has been a member of Congress since 2018, elected during President Trump's first term in an election cycle that was deemed the blue wave. And the aforementioned Congressman Levin joins us now on Inside California Politics. Congressman Levin, great to talk to you again. Appreciate you being on the show. A lot to discuss here. I want to start with a piece of legislation that you signed on to recently this past week called the Dignity Act, and it's immigration reform, and it deals with protected status. Before we get into the details, why did you decide to join this bipartisan effort?
Well, thank you for having me, Nikki. You know, the Dignity Act is something we've been working on for a number of years across the aisle with the basic premise that we can have both security at the border and also treat people with humanity. And unfortunately, we've seen the pendulum swing too far, one way during the Biden years, particularly the first couple of years when you had, 12, 1,300 crossings a day in between ports of entry down in my neck of the woods in San Diego County. Clearly was not an orderly situation. So we needed order at the border, which was delivered largely in the last year of the Biden administration. People forget that now, Nikki. But now the pendulum has swung way too far the other way, where the Trump administration with Stephen Miller and Tom Homan and the rest of them are now separating families and really doing things that are, for me, antithetical to American values. You know, my mom's parents were Mexican immigrants. They came when they were kids. My grandpa was 15 years old. My grandma was 4 years old. And I'd like to think that a story like theirs, where they could work hard, play by the rules, and ultimately have their youngest grandson become a member of Congress, is still possible. And that's what the Dignity Act is really all about, security and humanity. That's why I'm proud to be one of the 20 to reintroduce the bill, 10 Democrats, 10 Republicans.
Yeah, an order at the border. Some folks might push back on that and say, well, wait a minute, that was a flashpoint in the election, which result in the Biden administration cracking down. I want to ask you, though, specifically because you mentioned that this is a legislation that's been in the mix for a while, discussed for a while. 2023, I believe it was introduced, and then it died. So I just want to tick through some details. So in order for those who are undocumented to qualify for this, if it were to pass and become law, you would have to have lived in the U.S. for 5 years, no criminal record, worked and paid taxes. You'd have to pay a $7,000 fine over 7 years, and then buy your own health insurance. You would not be able to be eligible for any federal programs. And I thought it was interesting when I saw you and your Republican colleagues in the press conference earlier this week in Washington, D.C., and the Republicans were sure to say this is dignity, not amnesty. How likely of a chance do you think this bill has of going anywhere, considering all of the funding that was just set aside for ICE and immigration enforcement and the president's big, beautiful bill?
If President Trump actually wants to do a deal that will result in a path for those who are contributing positively to our society, for the busboys and the waiters and the farm workers and the day laborers and the hotel workers, those that are playing by the rules, this bill provides that opportunity. At the same time, the bill reinforces the need to have security at both our southern border and at the maritime border as well. We really do need a bipartisan immigration reform package. For those who say that everything is fixed, I point to stories all the time. I had a couple constituents of mine, Nikki, who were in the United States for 33 years, Gladys and Nelson Gonzalez. They raised their daughters, they paid taxes, played by the rules. After 33 years in the U.S., they were deported earlier this year. Had the Dignity Act been the law of the land, they would still be here contributing positively. And for those on the very far right, the Steve Bannons, the Charlie Kirks, the fact that they're coming out so aggressively against this bill tells me maybe we're on to something here, that they're actually paying attention to 10 Republicans and 10 Democrats coming together. There's, an old adage that if you're not being criticized, you're not doing anything in Washington. And so some criticism is good. Some well-placed critics are a good thing.
I want to ask you, because this is going to be an issue in the midterms, and your party is looking to retake control of the House. And considering your district and when you came into Congress in that so-called blue wave, and Democrats have struggled since the presidential election to really get their footing, to get a message, to find a leader of the party. And there was some CNN polling out this past week that said Democrats are energized to vote in this election, but in terms of a message and finding a leader, they're still they feel like they're out in the wilderness a little bit. How do you see things shaping up for Democrats here in California?
Well, I think we're going to have a very good result next November. I feel incredible energy on the ground when I am, connecting with our grassroots organizers and volunteers in our district, in our community. It reminds me a lot of the lead up to the 2018 election. Part of it, of course, is which districts are going to be the most competitive and how gerrymandering has impacted a lot of communities across the country. So how many vulnerable Republicans there are who are up for re-election, how many vulnerable Democrats. The numbers are a bit more difficult than they were in that 2018 cycle. But nonetheless, I am confident that if we get out the vote and do all the things we need to do and just communicate the basics on the economy, make sure people understand that the reality of the Trump presidency, remember, he campaigned on getting the economy on a better path, on bringing costs down. He's done nothing of the sort. His strategy on inflation appears to be the imposition of new tariffs that are only making matters worse. The instability in the markets right now and for corporate America to not know which end is up, given the tariff policies and some of the other policies, it really is a shame that we're in the spot we're in. I'm hopeful that we'll be able to have a strong positive message for what we would do differently to lower costs and actually focus on the average person who's just trying to get by. You know, the Republicans just passed a massive transfer of wealth to the very wealthiest in society, away from those most vulnerable, seniors and children and folks working hard. Their big, ugly bill, as I call it, Nikki, would take 17 million people off of health insurance. Millions more would lose food and energy costs would go up. I hope people recognize that what they are getting from Donald Trump is a far cry from what he promised on the campaign trail.
Okay, so quickly I have to ask you, because you said the word gerrymandering, and that's being floated here in Texas by our governor, Governor Newsom. It's going to be the topic of the second half of our show here, about redrawing the lines to help Democrats pick up some seats. This was a counter argument to President Trump, who was calling on that to happen in Texas. Do you support Governor Newsom doing that here in California?
Well, here's the thing. A lot of us, myself included, a number of years ago, voted to take California's independent redistricting system and have it as a nationwide system, because we do draw fair, independent maps in California with our commission. But there are really three options here, Nikki. One is to have nationwide independent redistricting. The other is to have no independent redistricting, just have it all be gerrymandered all around the country. And then the other is for Democrats to unilaterally disarm and allow for Republicans in the states that they control, the legislatures that they control, to gerrymander, where Democrats in the states that we control to unilaterally disarm and do commissions. And the reality is that we cannot unilaterally disarm anymore. If Texas moves forward and actually does what they are threatening to do and draws 5 new Republican seats, California will be left with no choice, in my view, but to do the same. And that isn't something that I like from a public policy standpoint, but it is a political necessity and a reality of the times that we're in. So I fully support exploring what that would require, what that would entail, and we'll have to see how this develops in the weeks ahead, and we'll see what Texas actually does.
All right, we will leave it there. Congressman Mike Levin, we appreciate your time here on Inside California Politics.
Thanks, Nikki.
All right, coming up.